Now I'm going to continue with the third parable. He speaks to the crowd, beginning in Matthew 13:31. The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed. I'm going to skip this. It is like a grain. I'm just going to go right to Matthew. The kingdom of heaven is like. Another parable put he forth to them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is. Is also in italics. Yeah. So just like is both. Like to a grain. Like a grain. So like is both. Like to Matthew only. Like to Matthew. You know, I think I want to cut out that word to. If I had, for example, likened from the earlier parable of the wheat and the tares, it would make sense to have to. Likened to. But if it's just like, which is the word used in Matthew, I don't think it quite fits to say is like to a grain. It makes more sense just to say is like a grain. I want to go with how Mark says it, like a grain of mustard seed. Like a grain of mustard seed. I'm going to leave out that too. So sticking with both, like a grain of mustard seed. Which, when it is sown in the earth, Matthew says, which a man took and sowed in his field. So before I say when it is sown in the earth, I will put a man and sowed in his field. I wonder if I can put them both. Which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all seeds, but when, maybe I can go back to Mark, it is sown in the earth is less than all the seeds. No, when it is sown in the earth is less than all the seeds that be in the earth. But when it is sown, it grows up and becomes greater. You know, I'm just going to combine a man took and sowed in his field with when it is sown in the earth. The important part is that it's sown, and then later, though it's small, it grows. I'm not cutting anything out between picking in the earth or in his field. I think they're equivalent. I don't think I'd be missing anything if I choose between a man took versus when it is. I'm definitely going to say it's sown. See, I'm going to go with which a man took and sowed in his field, which indeed is the least of all these, but when it is grown. I'm only going to use when once. I'll take out this first when from Mark, because it does have later in Mark, verse 32, but when it is sown. I don't know why it repeats, when it is sown in the earth is less than all the seeds that be in the earth, but when it is sown. He says when it is sown twice. You know, I actually really like how Matthew says it instead. He just says, a man took it, sowed it in his field, when it's the least of all the seeds, but when it's grown. He just goes into the fact that it's grown. It is the greatest among the herbs. Mark really lingers on when it's sown. It is like a grain of mustard seed. When it is sown in the earth is less than all the seeds that be in the earth. But when it is sown, it grows and becomes greater than all the herbs. So, yeah, Mark focuses on the fact that it's put in the earth. But I don't think that's the point of this parable. The point is that it's something small that grew into something greater than everything else. I'll put it that way, it includes the meaning from both, which means I'm still starting with how it says in Matthew, which a man took, which is both. Which from both a man took, and it is sown. And sowed in his field. in the earth. So only in is both. I'm still going to say in his field. I remember hearing something about how if it's planted in the mountain, its roots will eventually grow into any cracks, widen those cracks, and displace rocks or even portions of the mountain, make those cracks so large that it cuts out from the rock. So that could be how faith, like a mustard seed, will move mountains, because the mustard seed moves mountains. Yeah, that's later. If you have faith as a mustard seed, yeah, that's a different parable. So I'm not going to choose earth over field just because of that, because that would be a reason to choose earth, because a mountain would be earth but not a field. Yeah, I'm going to go with field, because it's being compared to the herbs. It's not being compared to other trees. There are other trees that are definitely larger than a mustard seed herb. So the point is that it's in his field, like a garden. So this is still all Matthew. And sowed. I'm not going to say sown is the same as sowed. It's different tense. In is both. Back to Matthew. His field. Mark just goes, is less than all the seeds that be in the earth. Matthew says, which indeed is the least of all seeds. So I can add that be in the earth from Mark. That way it still says earth. Which indeed is less. Which indeed is the least. So I could say which is only once in Mark, but twice in Matthew. So I can have it again, but it would only be Matthew. Which indeed is the least. So Mark says, is less. So indeed is still Matthew only. Now is from both. The least of all seeds from Matthew, or less than all the seeds. I think the least is more definite. I'll go with that. Back to Matthew only. The least of all seeds. Less than all of. So I'm going to go with of, but then all is both. All of Matthew. All from both. And because I'm going to put that be in the earth from Mark, I think I might have to choose the seeds that be in the earth. You know, I don't have to put the. It's not really necessary. The least of all seeds that be in the earth, or the least of all the seeds that be in the earth. I don't really have to put it, but just to be all-inclusive, I'll put that. That's Mark only. The, both, seeds, Mark only now. That be in the earth. But when it is sown, that's Mark. Matthew says, but when it is grown. So, still from both. But when it is. But when it is grown. Okay, so that leaves out what it says in Mark. But when it is sown, it grows up. The act of growing, does only happen when it's sown in the earth. So it's not necessarily when it's sown. It's when it's sown, then it grows. But when it is sown, it grows up and becomes greater than all the herbs. That's Mark. Matthew. It is the greatest among the herbs. I want to have becomes. I like the process. Not just that when it's grown, it is the greatest. In Matthew, it's just when it's grown. It just skips right to the end. When it's grown, it is the greatest. Which is fine, but because there's a process in Mark, and I show that by using the word grows, I'm going to stick with Mark and use becomes greater. When it is sown, it grows up and becomes... Yeah, I'm going to go with Mark. So instead of is the greatest, I'm definitely going to go with and becomes. Now the question, should I say greater or the greatest? It becomes greater or it becomes the greatest? Greater may seem more like the process, but I feel like putting finality here, because I said when it is sown, it grows up and becomes... Yeah, I'm going to go with the greatest. It moves into the greatest. Not just that it moves into greater, because greater than everything is the greatest. So I like the greatest. And I can't say they're the same, so I'm just going to go with Matthew. The greatest is Matthew only. Greater than all herbs. Greatest among herbs. Because it's greatest, I have to put among. But I can still put all. Greatest among all herbs. So among is still Matthew. Just the word all from Mark only. And from both herbs. Now back to Luke. To what is the kingdom of God like? It is like. So this is, I could say, is also Luke. And like a grain of mustard seed. Like a grain of mustard seed. So all these, all three. Which man took. So which is also all three. A man took and cast and sowed is in Matthew. All this is orange. And cast into his garden. Matthew has a man took and sowed in his field. Let me see what Mark says. When it is sown in the earth is less than all the seeds. So the first mention, a man took and sowed in his field, which is indeed the least. That's by itself. The seed which a man took, cast into its ground, and grew and waxed great, cast into his garden. So I have the option, I could say, cast into his garden. I think I'm going to go with sowed instead of cast. Sowing is you want something to grow. Casting is like you can cast something aside. It could be tossed away. So I'm going to keep sowed. In his, into is what Luke has. But I'll say in is all three now. His is Matthew and Luke. So garden or field? I'm going to put garden. Yeah. Garden. Luke continues with and it grew. It grows up. And waxed a great tree. And becomes the greatest among all herbs. And waxed. I'll leave becomes a great tree. I'll put great here from Luke as part of greatest.